Welcome to the LDN Radio Show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elsiegood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. Today we're joined by Cindy from the United States, who has the triad, MCAS, POTS and EDS. Thank you for joining us today, Cindy.
Thank you for having me.
Could you tell us when you first noticed there was something wrong with you? How old were you?
Oh, I was a child. I was a very sick kiddo. But as far as hypermobility, that was pretty apparent from a very young age. Ribs would slip out of place, knees would pop out of place. I was injured quite a bit, ankles rolled a lot, those types of things. And the doctor, in my childhood just kind of, yeah, you're hypermobile. And that was the end of it. There was no further discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So talk us through what happened in your life.
Well, I feel like, having hypermobility in the younger years was there, pretty sick, a lot, ear infections, low immune system. But then it was really after I started my menstrual cycle, that things kind of ramped up for me. I got mono in my middle school years. And then after that, things kind of just started getting worse and worse, for me. So I had a lot of menstrual issues, dysmenorrhea is what they called it back then, cysts on my ovaries, those types of things. And then I just, POTS was not something that they used back then for me. It was, I'm 40. So back then the term was vasovagal syncope. So I would faint, exercise induced issues, standing up, get really lightheaded. So that was kind of, and you know what, the doctors really, again, they just shrugged, kind of was like, I almost, from that young age, about 12, 13, already felt dismissed with the symptoms that I was experiencing. So fast forward to 21, I had a very difficult pregnancy. I got pregnant at 20 with my oldest. She's 19 now. And went into preterm labor at 28 weeks. They were able to stop the labor, and then I had her naturally, but well, that was because she came so fast. There was no chance of any kind of meds or anything like that. So she came pretty fast, and they could not get me to stop hemorrhaging after. So they knocked me out. We're able to save everything. Didn't need to give me a hysterectomy at that point, but basically said, you're at high risk for something like this to happen in the future. And I had a really terrible healing process with that after. And then my gallbladder went bad. So it was just kind of this, constant problems. Right shortly after I got pregnant with my youngest, she's 13 now, is when I experienced 20 week. At 20 weeks, I went into preterm labor, and both babies were born at 35 weeks, both of my kiddos. So I had to have them early. And then when they went in with C-section, they discovered I only had half a uterus. So that's what my kids they couldn't grow past 35 weeks. But at that point, I had been told that I had endometriosis, but really what I had was a horned, I didn't have a fallopian tube that was formed on my right side. And then my uterus is only half the size. So, just kind of these weird things. And then right after that is when I first started experiencing what at the time we thought were food allergies. But then later on, would discover probably it was more the mast cell going on. But for me, it felt like every time that there was like some sort of like the mono and then puberty and then pregnancy, it would be like I'd have a season of kind of doing okay. And then it was a trigger. And then all of a sudden I would just have all these problems for after my last pregnancy though, that was it. Like I went anaphylactic several times. Just beans. I became allergic to beans out of nowhere. Eggs, wheat, gluten, and it started off with just like hives on my face. And then it became my esophagus would close up. And I wouldn't be able to breathe. And then I discovered, so my daughter, my youngest is 13 now. In 2014, when she was turning 3, I'm adopted also. Sorry, I didn't say that in the beginning, but I had no medical history to go off of for why was I so sick, what was wrong with me. And then I found my birth mother in 2014 and found out that she had to have her, she had Barrett's esophagus, achalasia, had to have her gallbladder removed, had to have a hysterectomy, and I had to have a hysterectomy after my last as well. So we knew there was a genetic component there, but we didn't know what it was. So my aunt, my birth mother, my grandmother, my little sister, and then shortly thereafter, my daughter, my oldest daughter, started having symptoms. Hers was very much POTS. It was very clear. So my oldest daughter's symptoms were mostly POTS related symptoms. The rest of our symptoms for the family, and it was all women. That was the other, for us, there was no boys involved with having those symptoms in the family, which was interesting too. But they basically were gonna need to do surgery on my esophagus. They removed my mother's esophagus. She was one of the first it was in a medical journal in California, and they replaced it with her, I guess her lower colon, made a new esophagus for her. So I was like, yeah, I don't want that happening to me. So I was good, just kind of on this journey of trying to prevent as much as I could any kind of other things that I could. And I had to have lots of second opinions because a lot of doctors were just like, we don't know what to do for you, but I could not swallow anymore. My vagus nerve was involved. We knew that. I kind of gave up on Western medicine at that point because they were just wanting to put me on omeprazole and call it a day. And I knew that I was very ill. I couldn't swallow, I couldn't eat. I was headed for a feeding tube at that point. Got a second opinion, and thankfully my GI doctor was very good. Dr. DeMeester out of Oregon. And he found some precancerous cells, diagnosed me with the beginnings of Barrett's esophagus as well. And he gave me the Nissan fundoplication surgery in 2019. So a lot of GI issues for us and what they called food allergies. But, first I was diagnosed with EOE, but it wasn't EOE. It was my lower valve was not functioning anymore. It was staying open. So all the stomach acid was coming up and eroding everything. And the vagus nerve probably had a lot involved there. And so I turned to natural medicine for my care when I was being shrugged at all the time and made to feel crazy. And they agreed with Dr. DeMeester that I needed to have that surgery. Had I come to them a little earlier, maybe we could have done some earlier intervention to help that vagus nerve work. They gave me a $20 tincture and I was able to swallow again. It's $20 with herbs, and it helped to activate that vagus nerve and helped that valve to function properly, but the damage was already done. So I needed that surgery. So they created a new valve with that surgery, and I did get relief, but within 1 year, so 2019, then I was diagnosed with EDS for the first time. So the whole time I just had all these specialists, and then I was kind of at my wit's end. I was in a lot of pain, just from head to toe pain. And I went on a play date one day with my daughter's friend's mom and the children playing. And she's like, I'm really sorry. I can't run around, because she was really athletic and stuff and run around with the kids. And I was just sitting there. It's like, I just can't run. I'm really immobile right now. I'm going through some health challenges. And she asked what was going on. And I told her, and she said, you know what? I should introduce you to my colleague. I think that you sound like you have maybe mast cell going on. And I didn't even know what that was. at the time. And so she gave me the name of her colleague, which was Dr. Alina Guggenheim out of Oregon. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she's one of the leading specialists for EDS in Oregon on the West Coast. And I didn't know that though. I didn't know about EDS. I didn't know about mast cell. I didn't really have any education about those disorders at that point. She had a 9-month waiting list, so I waited 9 months to see her. And then when I went to see her, it was right after my surgery. She asked me some basic, medical questions about family history. At that point, I had that information, so I told her. She knew about all of my surgeries that I had had over the years and all the different problems. And she gave me the Baton test, which I didn't know. I don't know, that's how you say it, Baton, the Baton test. Beighton. That's what they call it out here. Where she was, she had me doing this stuff and, can I touch my hands to the floor? And I could, and I did. And it's a 9 out of 9 criteria. And I scored 9 out of 9 on that test. I didn't know what she was doing. I was just like, yeah, I can do that, and then she's like, you have EDS. I mean, it was weird for me because I went in to that point with zero expectations, of having any expectations at all, to going from no answers, having no idea what was wrong with me, to you have EDS, but you also probably have mast cell and you also have POTS. And I was like, oh, just like that. And, half an hour. And I went 35 years with zero answers. It changed my life that day. And having those answers, I think, is vital to the journey of dealing with these, because symptom management is huge, right? But not knowing what's wrong with you and having so many doctors over the years even question the legitimacy of your symptoms is so hard on the mental health part. So for me, having that diagnosis, it didn't change, treatment. It didn't change my circumstances. It just helped me to understand why. And I think for all of us going through that, I think that's vital in the healing process. Now, healing, I say healing, not that we can heal from this, forever, like that we'll get cured, because there's not a cure for it, but healing journey as far as, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. Where do we go from here? So sorry, that is long-winded. It's kind of a long story, isn't it?
It's the validation you need, isn't it? That you're not crazy, that it is real, and this is what it's called.
100%. Yeah, my husband picked me up from the appointment. I came out. I was kind of shaking still. And I have felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, just totally. And he was like, what's wrong? And I said, well, nothing actually. I have this diagnosis that I have this chronic lifelong disease, which is, that's also daunting, but it was relieving too. Knowing what's wrong with me, what's going on. It's not all in my head. Yeah.
And what's your diet like now? Because you said that you were fed by a tube.
Oh no, I wasn't fed by a tube. I was on the way to being fed by a
tube. Okay, sorry.
I was at that point where I was prior to, had I not got that second opinion and Dr. Demeester did my surgery, I would have been on a feeding tube 100%. And I think that's the other important thing that I really, I just feel like early interventions are so important because of the lack of diagnoses, and the time that goes on and on and on, and years of just these diseases getting worse and worse and worse. Because it's EDS, of course, it's a connective tissue disease, so it affects you everywhere. It could affect anywhere on different people, right? And for us, it was very GI, and I know a lot of patients have the same kind of GI issues, but because people aren't being diagnosed in time or properly, then it gets way worse than it could have been, and it didn't have to get to that level of severity. And that's for me, something that I feel like as a community and medical community and, just the advocacy there, earlier diagnosis for this is so vital, I think, for people to get earlier treatments for these things. So I did not have to get a feeding tube, but I was on a liquid diet at that point, leading up to that. So I was on the verge of needing to. My birth mom has had to have a feeding tube twice in her lifetime. So she, it's just, and I know a lot of other peers, that are going through this. A lot of other EDS patients are having to be on feeding tubes. So for me, once I had that surgery, I was able to eat and swallow. I think mentally though, I was still so afraid of eating solid food. So I really do I'm very bland with my diet. I avoid, for the most part, I try to avoid all my triggers. And food allergies that they have tested me for that I know about, because I think there are some things that they don't test for that probably trigger me that I don't know what they are yet. So it's kind of process of elimination via symptoms with hives and things. But soups, I love soup. I love smoothies. I eat very clean. I have to. If I eat anything garbagey, then my body reacts terribly. Sugar for me is a huge trigger for inflammation. So I don't eat a lot of sugar, anything with added sugar. I try to, stick to like fruits, and I do like monk fruit. So I've kind of learned how to bake with monk fruit because it's a low glycemic index. But for me, diet's a huge tool in my tool belt for keeping me healthy. So, yeah.
Well, we've come to the end, and thank you very much for sharing your experience with us.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate what you're doing and educating people. And I think the awareness is so important.
I'm Dr. Leonard Weinstock, a guy who's been prescribing LDN since 2005, and I've seen the wonders. And I keep on seeing them, especially in hard to diagnose conditions. They're not that hard to do, but once you know about mast cell activation syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you'll find that 17% of your friends or relatives have one or more of these conditions, and you can help them. We're making a documentary to wake up the medical community, to educate the population, but we need funding. So please fund whatever you can afford, no matter how little. www.mcasfund.com. That's mcasfund.com.
Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.